Hello, I'm Tracy Nicholas, and welcome to Folkloring. I am a passionate folklore practitioner, and to me, folkloring is more than just a podcast. It's my commitment to help you connect with your roots and awaken the wisdom within you. Welcome to this episode of Folkloring, which is all about curses. But before I start in on that, I want to tell you how I've been folkloring lately. And the first way, I have some friends who are moving to a new office with their business, a bigger, better office, yay. And they needed to clean out their old office and get it painted before they moved. And so I was talking to them about it the day before, yesterday, and they said, oh yeah, this is what we're doing tomorrow. And I said, oh, do you want some help? And so I went and helped them paint. And I am fairly decent at painting because I've got a really old house. And so I've painted a lot of the rooms in my house myself. And so it just felt very like there's camaraderie. It felt like I was showing up for, my community, for my neighbors, my friends. And so that was really nice. And that was a whole day that just, I didn't really have the time, but I made the time and it was great. Now, the other way that I've been folkloring lately is that I have a necklace that I wear every day, and it's got a ring on it. And a while back, I was getting a reading from a woman. She's very nice. And she said, I told her, I've been having trouble grounding myself lately. And I've been feeling very scattered. And she said, you've got to find yourself a little talisman. And when you feel like you want to be grounded, like work with the talisman, work on your grounding when you're calm and nothing is going on. And then if you're out and about and you feel scattered or what have you, just grab hold of that talisman. And so I decided to make this ring that I wear on a chain that was given to me by someone who I love very much. And I just use that and I just grab that. It's always on me. And so I always have that available to me. So that's what I've been doing lately. Now, on to curses. I'm going to start with giving you a little definition and going through some types of curses. And then I'm going to go into some more famous curses, not the really top famous ones, because I figure you know about those already, but some that maybe you haven't heard of, maybe you have, and I can give you a little detail on them. And because, of course, I picked another topic that is massive, so I had to figure out which parts of it I was going to address. So I'm not going to really get into much of how you curse someone. That's up to you if you want to do that. I typically would not want to do that, but it's completely your call. So a curse is the expression of a wish that some sort of misfortune or evil or doom befalls a person or a group. Now, it can be achieved by a formula or a charm that is intended to cause misfortune to someone else. And it could also be the act of reciting such a formula, right? You're going to curse someone. And a curse it's like an invocation intended to cause harm. And it can also refer to sort of the general state of feeling misfortune or suffering, like, I feel like I'm cursed lately. Now, where did curses come from? Some of the origins, in religion, a lot of cultures have beliefs in supernatural forces that can be invoked to bring harm to others. In ancient religions, priests or shamans often had the power to curse people as a form of punishment. Now, social and cultural origins, curses have been used throughout history as a means of social control, a way to vent frustration. And in many cultures, it's considered to be a grave offense to curse someone, resulting in being ostracized or even violence against a person. And a lot of ancient cultures used to believe that if a sudden illness befell someone and they didn't have an explanation for that, that was likely a curse. And so then they start looking around for someone to blame, and it can get to be very dangerous. Okay, so types of curses. Now, you've got spoken curses, ritualistic curses, where you're saying the curse out loud. You've got your hexes, And that is a spell that is cast for ill will, and it's found a lot in Germanic folklore. Now, it is not necessarily as severe or malevolent as a curse. And in some cultures and magical traditions, a hex is seen as a form of sympathetic magic where the spell is cast to bring about the misfortune upon a specific person or a specific situation. Some people believe in generational curses, and so a family is cursed, and then it carries down to subsequent generations. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on how, if you feel like you do have a generational curse, how to get out of it. Now we have things like voodoo doll kind of things, and there's different cultures have it. It's not just voodoo dolls. There are other dollies and stuff that people are using to curse other people. There are the kinds of curses that are like, think of the mummy curses, where a person is cursed if they desecrate some sort of sacred space. There is binding, and that's a more subtle form of cursing, and it's sort of designed to keep a person from achieving success. So it's like a bad luck charm. You can do written curses. You can write something down, a person's name, what you want to have happen to them, and you can freeze that paper. You can burn the paper. In ancient times, in ancient Greece, they had curse tablets, and I'm going to talk about that in a bit and walk you through exactly what the process was for using one of those curse tablets. And of course, we do have sports curses. So when your team is doing poorly, you've got something to blame that on, because of course it's a curse. How do you know that you've been cursed? Well, if you are having persistent bad luck, especially in areas of your life that had previously been stable or you were fortunate. If you start to have unexplained health issues or chronic fatigue, that could definitely be looked at as a curse. Sudden financial losses without logical cause, recurring nightmares, vivid, distressing dreams, and even a feeling of being watched or like an oppressive atmosphere around you. If any of those things are happening to you and you can't find any explanation, you might want to consider that perhaps you have been cursed. Although if it is a sudden illness, please go see your doctor. Always the mundane solutions first, right? So I am now going to look at some specific curses. And I'm going to start on the Isle of Man. And in the Isle of Man, they seem to have escaped a lot of the horrors of the prosecution of suspected witches. And so Manx witchcraft is still widely practiced in some areas, particularly more rural. And so there, a curse was a primitive sorcery that can be used by amateurs, right? So cursing is easy to do, and so a lot of people did it. Now, there was a death curse that they had, and when someone was sick, usually what they would do is there'd be a corner kind of partitioned off, and there was like a bale of hay or straw, and the sick person was kept there. Now, if the person was dying, the priest would give him the last sacrament, and the vessels that were used for that were placed on an altar or a church stone, which is a flat stone marked with a cross, which he brought with him. So there was a curse that they would say that would basically say that you wished that a priest might be there soon to perform last rites. And it's said to be one of the bitterest curses in the Manx language. And the curse goes, "The stone of the church in the corner of thy house." So yeah, that's like, they're not playing around there. Now, another curse, another Manx curse, was called the Skib Lome. And this was a curse of annihilation and aimed first at the hearth, which is, the gathering place, the center of the family, and it's, a symbol of life. Now, in the full ritual of the Skib Lome, the person casting the curse carried a besom, and it was typically a woman, and she would make sweeping gestures with it. Her hair would be uncovered and falling loose around her shoulders, and she would face the door of her enemy's house. And as she was making these sweeping motions, she would say, "May the besom of destruction come upon thee thyself, upon thy hearth, upon thy health, upon thy possessions, and upon thy offspring." So they were serious about their curses there. Now, the word Lome, as it's used in the name Skib Lome, had the sort of added significance of complete and utter destruction. It had a similar connotation to an exclamation that they used to use, and that was Latsalome, and that literally means the naked fire. And it was something that you'd cry out if you were having like extreme urgency or you were desperate. It's like, my God. So yes, Latsalome. Now, the good news is that you can counter the Skib Lome. And how you do that is you take 3 flower heads from the plant Milfolium, 3 from Dittany of Creek, and 3 from rue, and with them, you dry them thoroughly, and you light them together with 3 hairs coming fresh from the head of the witch who cast the Skib Lome. And once that's burnt to ash, you use your casting besom to sweep from hearth to door, but only if you've made a complete mix of all and spread it out. And you loudly, while you're sweeping, you loudly cry for help from the rule of 3. So the Skib Lome will plague you no more. So you don't want to be messing around with anybody from the Isle of Man. Moving on to ancient Greece, and they had, I talked about this a little bit earlier, they had curse tablets there. And so what they would do, they would try to harness malevolent spirits and the wrath of the gods to damn their foes by using these curse tablets. And what they would do, there would be a binding spell scratched onto the surface of thin lead tablets. And then the tablets would be rolled up and nails would be driven into them. And then they would place them underground if they wanted to appeal to underworld gods like Pluto and Hecate. And other times, the text simply named the victim and the misfortune or death that was to befall them with the use of this curse tablet. Now, one of their uses was to try and get help from the dead themselves. And so a lot of Roman graves contain these tablets. And usually they were asking for help from a particular deity or ancestor by having that deity or person, spirit, bestow misfortune on them. Now, in return, the person writing the message would promise to make offerings at the temple, so you couldn't just ask for the curse and be done with it. And Romans would bury these tablets in front of thresholds or upon trees outside of homes to bestow curses on the people in those homes. And they thought that being in proximity to the target's homes, that would help the gods bring to them and make the curse easier to get to them. And it was also a common practice to put a curse tablet in a body of water. Also in ancient Greece, they had curse dolls, and I talked about this a little bit earlier too. And like voodoo dolls, the ancient Romans would use miniature dolls as effigies of the target that they wanted to have a curse against. And they would sometimes use the cursed dolls in conjunction with a cursed tablet, and other times they just use the dolls by themselves. And the dolls were generally made out of lead or bronze. Now, in order to be an effective cursed doll, it had to meet a bunch of criteria. The first is the doll had to contain the target's name somewhere. The doll's arms and legs were twisted back behind the torso. The doll would be skewered with nails. The head and feet would be backwards, and it was to be placed on a grave buried near the target's home or in a body of water. And cursed dolls basically served the same purpose as cursed tablets, but they wouldn't always employ like those specific directions on how to use them. So you could kind of use your creativity when you're cursing someone. Okay, so moving on, I'm going to talk about some famous curses now. And the first I'm going to talk about is the curse of Tippecanoe. And it's also called Tecumseh's curse. Now, the curse is an alleged pattern of deaths in the office of the presidents of the United States. But it's only presidents that were elected in a year that was evenly divisible by 20. And it started with William Harrison, and it ran through John F. Kennedy. And so, because when Ronald Reagan was elected in 1980, he was wounded by a gunshot, but he survived. So then people are like, the curse is over now. And we've had a couple of presidents since then that haven't died. So the background to this story is in 1811, Tecumseh, who was a Native American Shawnee warrior-in-chief, led forces attacking Harrison's army in the Battle of Tippecanoe and earned Harris the nickname of Old Tippecanoe. And Harrison had negotiated the 1809 Treaty of Fort Wayne, in which the Native Americans ceded large tracts of land to the government. And it was basically coerced, right? And so the treaty angered Tecumseh and brought the government, soldiers, and the Indians to the brink of war. And that was known as Tecumseh's War. And Tecumseh and his brother organized a group of Indian tribes to resist the westward expansion of the United States, but they lost at Tippecanoe. And he did continue to resist for a couple of years, but then he was eventually killed. Now, as I said, the curse targeted presidents who were elected in years ending in 0. And under the curse, it was said that all presidents would die in office. So, like I said, William Henry Harrison was the first, and he was elected in 1840 and died a month later. Now, Abraham Lincoln was elected in 1860, and he was assassinated in 1865. James Garfield is next up, elected in 1880, and he only lasted 4 months before dying after an assassination. And then there was William McKinley, who won his second term in 1900 and was assassinated the following year. Warren Harding is next, elected 1920, died of a stroke in 1923. Roosevelt won his third term in 1940 and suffered a brain hemorrhage in 1945, causing his death. John F. Kennedy was elected in 1960, and as many of us know, he was murdered in 1963 by Lee Harvey Oswald. Reagan was next, and he was elected in 1980, and he, as I said, survived an assassination attempt. And some say that he broke the curse, because next up was George Bush, elected in 2000, and he survived 2 assassination attempts. So don't know if that curse is true or not, but it was a whole lot of coincidence if it isn't. But thanks to Reagan, who apparently broke the curse. Now, next I want to talk about another type of curse, and this is in Japan, and it's called kodoku. And kodoku means curse poison, and it can also be called kodo, which is curse method, koitsu, which is curse technique, and fuko, which is sorcery curse. And it's a type of poison magic found in Japanese folklore. Now, it was first used in the Nara period, and that's Common Era 710 to 794. And the primal ritual of kodoku, as well as Chinese counterparts, because they had the same sort of thing there. The way that they did it primarily was to get a group of poisonous insects or other creatures like snakes, scorpions, spiders, and put them in a jar or a box without feeding them. So they would kill and devour each other. And it was believed that the last one remaining would absorb all the energy and hatred of the rest, becoming more powerful, and its toxicity would also increase. Now, various fates awaited the survivor. Among the most popular was to bewitch it and feed it to enhance its poisonous power, which could then be directed against the enemy that the person was targeting for the curse. Now, sometimes it was believed that the survivor's nourishment came from the conjured individual's energy. So the survivor that lived through it was feeding off of the energy of the person that you were cursing. Now, if you neglected to feed that survivor, it had dire consequences for the person casting this curse, as the survivor's energy would turn against them until they compensated them by granting favors, sometimes even like financial favors or through liberation. Now, interestingly, one of the ways to break one of these curses is to identify the culprit, the survivor, and release the survivor by the roadside and leave it in a jar and leave it with a pile of money or gold or jewels. And the money would serve as bait for anyone who found it and took it, and then they would take the curse with them. Now, the death of the animal was also an instant remedy. And a second option was to kill that surviving animal and use its body fluids as parts of poisons or potions intended for mental and spiritual harm, although if it was a poison, it would be physical harm as well. They could use these bodily fluids to make ointments that were believed to cause plagues in crops and deadly diseases in humans. They could also, interestingly, weirdly, could be used to create love potions and gain favor from someone, to accumulate power and wealth, to protect the sorcerer. And in case of physical illnesses, sometimes they would use it as medical remedies, including like homeopathic treatments. So definitely widely used. Another curse that you've more than likely heard of, but may not know the origins of, is the bad luck of Friday the 13th. Now, where this came from, in the early 14th century, King Philip of France borrowed some money from the Knights Templar to fund his war against the English. And he decided after that he didn't want to pay it back. So on Friday, October 13th of 1307, King Philip, in collusion with the Pope, launched a surprise attack, bringing about the ultimate destruction of the Knights Templar. And Jacques de Molay, who was the leader of the Knights, was imprisoned and tortured over the course of 7 years. And at the end, they burned him at the stake. Now, just before this public execution, de Molay cursed the king and the Pope to die quickly and further cursed the house of Capet to destruction. And sure enough, within a year, Pope Clement V and King Philip had both died very mysteriously. And then within the next few years, all three of King Philip's sons died, as did his only male grandchild. And so as a result of this, there was no heir. And so the French crown went to the House Valois, and that brought an end to the reign of House Capet. Another one that you probably know, but again, may not know what the origins are, is the evil eye. We've all heard about, someone's going to shoot you the evil eye. And it's, completely ubiquitous throughout Latin American culture. And this concept has been around for centuries. And its origins might be traced back to ancient Greece, Rome, and the Mediterranean, with some of these symbols going back as far as 1500 BC. Now, it's also called the curse of the mal de ojo, which is the bad eye, and it's said to bring bad luck or bodily harm to those who have the gaze cast upon them. Now, this curse can be intentional, where you're concentrating your negative thoughts and energies toward a person. But in Latin culture, it is believed that the evil eye can be cast unintentionally, particularly toward beautiful children. And the belief is that if someone looks at a beautiful child with envy or ill intent, it will result in the child becoming sick or injured. Now, to remedy this curse, folklore has come up with a lot of rituals, including touching the child quickly after the stare, rubbing an egg around the child's head to absorb the bad energy, and of course, there's lots of talismans that will ward off the evil intent. Another superstition that you've likely heard is about a broken mirror, breaking a mirror being 7 years of bad luck. Now, the origins of this belief come from ancient Rome, and the Romans believed that the human soul renewed every 7 years, and in those 7 years, it would repair whatever damage that they had suffered in that time on a soul level. Now, they also believed that a mirror's reflection was a way to look into the soul. So in essence, if you break a mirror, you break apart your soul, which would then have to go through a 7-year cycle to renew itself so you could be whole again. And until your soul achieves that renewal 7 years later, you would endure misfortune because your soul has been broken. The next one I have is about some of the superstition that you find in theaters. Now, we know it's bad luck to wish actors good luck. And that's one of the reasons that people tell them to break a leg. Now, I always find this one interesting because, why break a leg, right? And I have heard it said that breaking a leg is so the curtains that are around a proscenium stage, around a proscenium arch, the ones that are not the ones in the very front, but the ones that are further upstage, so actors can come in and out at various places in the stage without being seen beforehand. Those are called, the ones that hang down are called legs. The ones on the top are called borders. So I've heard it, people have pondered whether breaking a leg means being able to get to the point where you cross past one of these curtains, one of these legs, and you make it out onto stage. So you successfully get all the way to stage. I don't know, that may be true. Now, also, it's bad luck to say the word Macbeth in the theater, except during a performance of that play. And supposedly, this is because tragedy has befallen productions of the play. And so, people are like, oh, you can't say it. You have to say the Scottish play. Now, apparently, there's a lot of fabrication or maybe selective evidence picking to prove that this is true, but it seems that the story originated with a complete fabrication by a man named Max Beerbohm. And he was a British cartoonist and critic, and he was born in the 1870s. So it was, 3 centuries after Shakespeare. So who knows why he was annoyed with Shakespeare? But he made up a story that the first actor cast to play Lady Macbeth died like the night before the play's opening night. And obviously, since then, this story has become part of the myth that the play is cursed and has brought bad luck to those that are involved with it, to the point that you can't even say the name backstage. And obviously, there have been real accidents during runs of Macbeth over its 400-year history, but those accidents do tend to gain more attention than accidents in other plays because of this curse. So, those are all of the curses that I wanted to share with you today. So I want to move on to folkloring. And there's a lot of different ways that you can be folkloring with curses. Now, I'm not going to recommend that you curse anyone. That is up to you and your conscience. I have heard it suggested that when you look at a basic curse, it can be done easily by anyone, and I spoke about that a little earlier. You can say, I hate you, or, little kids, like, I wish you were dead, or, like anything that you immediately are putting negative energy toward another person can be considered a curse. And I think that it's important to remember that anybody can do that. And so you can obviously do much more complicated and sophisticated curses. You can use different, herbs and items and dolls and tablets and paper. And so there's lots of different ways to do a curse. But I think that it's more important to look at how to protect yourself from curses, because although I am quite sure that all of my listeners are lovely people, you never know when you might run across the wrong kind of person. So I want to talk a bit about some of the ways that you can protect yourself. Now, we talked about charms and talismans. So you can have your good luck charm. You can, have something that you wear as a piece of jewelry or that hangs in your house, right? So there are some specific talismans that I'm sure you've seen for specifically the evil eye. There's the Hamsa, which is a palm-shaped amulet that originates from the Middle East. There's that classic sort of blue eye that has like the 3 sort of rings, which is a charm that is very commonly found in Greece and Turkey. Now, I talked about hexes earlier, and you can see, like, some people will do hex signs. They'll paint them on their buildings. This is pretty common on barns in Pennsylvania Dutch country, and it's intended to ward off any hexes that might come the farmer's way. Now, you could also use what's known as a decoy poppet, and the decoy poppet is something that you create, just like any poppet, and you put symbols on it to represent yourself. And then any curses or evil intent or anything that is going to be directed at you, that will be redirected to the poppet, so you stay safe and you don't get sick or have bad fortune or whatever. Now, historically, witches' bottles were used, and they would be buried on a person's land, at the edge of the land, and witches' bottles have a lot of different things. It can be used with vinegar. They sometimes use them with urine, and you put sharp, spiky things in there, rusty nails, that sort of thing, pieces of maybe broken glass, whatever you want to put in there to sort of ward off any witch who might be sending malevolent energy toward you or toward your homestead, right? Now, there's also reversal spells. So if you see any of those signs that you've been cursed that we talked about earlier, you can try one of the reversal spells. And there's a few of them that you could look at. One is a return to sender. And I've seen this one done very simply. You just take a black candle and you light it and look into a mirror, and you just simply state that you're sending the energy or the curse or whatever back to whoever sent it. So it would go back to them and cause them whatever ill that they wished upon you. There's also something that is called a mirror box. And so you line a box with mirrors. And so it uses those reflective surfaces to trap and reflect the negative energy of the curse back to its source. And so this one can be particularly effective when dealing with a known source and what their malevolent intent is. In this box, you can include rose petals, and they symbolize love and protection, preventing any backlash from this curse. You can also use broken mirror shards, and in which you collect the shards of a broken mirror, and you take the shards and place them in different corners of your home to kind of disperse the curse's energy. No word on whether you'd get 7 years of bad luck for that or not. You can use binding spells, and knots and objects symbolize restraint. And so you're, sort of knotting up into these, this rope or string or whatever, the ill intent. So it doesn't come to you, you catch it. We've talked a lot about cleansing rituals. If you feel like there's something that's negative that's being aimed at you, we've talked about smudging. You can take ritual baths to sort of wash it away from you, wash that negative energy off of you. And you can use salt and herbs. There is a salt cleansing ritual. And to use salt for curse removal, you can either sprinkle it in a thin line around the perimeter of your living space or in a circle around yourself. And that purifies the space that you're in. You can also combine the salt with rosemary or lavender, and then that will make it more effective. Now, the color of salt you use may have an additional effect. So black salt, which mostly when people are using black salt, it's regular salt mixed with charcoal or maybe ash. You can buy actual black salt from volcanic areas. And so the black salt would be used to break a more severe curse or to protect against any psychic attacks. Now, with white salt, you want to use that when you're focusing on purity and general protection. There's also a cleansing technique that is an egg cleanse, and this uses sort of the egg's porous structure to draw out negative energy. And what you do is you gently roll an uncooked egg all over your body, starting from your head and working down to your feet. And this is believed to draw out negative influences and entrap them within the egg's shell. Then add some herbs like sage, maybe mugwort, into a bowl of water. And then you crack the egg into the water. So you're sort of symbolically strengthening that cleansing process. Then you examine the egg after the ritual. And if you notice any patterns like bubbles or blood spots or anything like that, you probably need to do the ritual again because you probably haven't gotten all the negative energy. If you decide to do this, pay attention and see if any sort of generational curses might reveal themselves to you, because that's part of the meditative process of this type of cleanse. Now, obviously, people have long used prayers and invocations to seek divine assistance in protection. So no different with curses. People will pray to have the curse removed for them. Some other things, getting a little bit more to the physical world, energy healing, such as Reiki or other alternative therapies, might be employed to sort of balance a person's energy field, right? That's part of what the, Reiki and acupuncture is for. So you might want to consider doing that if you're feeling just like tired out, exhausted, dragged down, you feel like you have a dark mood, anything along those lines. And also, just in general, like strengthening your own mental and emotional resilience is part of getting rid of those negative energies. And when you do regular practices like meditation, you just are at a higher energetic level. And if someone is sending negative energy, if someone is saying terrible things to you, whatever it is, the higher that you keep your mental and sort of spiritual, emotional resilience, the better off you're going to do at fending off those kinds of things. So, like I said, I wasn't going to get to everything with curses because it's such a huge topic, but I had a lot of fun researching this one. Thank you very much for listening. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. And feel free to get a hold of me. I have said a couple of times now, but I am loving life over at Blue Sky. So you can find me at Folkloring Podcast. And if you decide to curse someone, I think just be very careful because they may use some of the techniques to send those curses back to you. So make sure you know what you're doing and protect yourself from anyone out there cursing you. Thanks, everybody. As always, thanks for listening to Folkloring. If you liked what you heard, please consider leaving a rating and review. And don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. If you have any questions or comments or would like to suggest a topic for a future episode, please email us at folkloringpod@gmail.com or message us on Facebook or Instagram. Other places you can find me are at the Folklore Podcast as the theater, film, and storytellers correspondent, or creating folklore